Hey, welcome to the Mullins Library. Hey, so this started out with me posting images of some of the interesting comics I own on my Instagram feed using the hashtag the Mullins Library just to keep it all organized. Then COVID-19 happened, so that meant I wasn't posting as much and I had to focus on my job. I'm a teacher, and I had to move all my classes online and start remote teaching. To do that, I started making a lot of videos. And in the course of that, I thought, maybe I could do that with the Mullins Library. And so here we are. So who am I? Hi, I'm Nick. I read comics, I create comics, I write about comics sometimes, I've even taught about comics on a few occasions. I started reading comics regularly in the 1980s, and so if you know anything about the history of comics in the United States, that is the time period often referred to as the black and white boom, when there were all kinds of comics being published. The most famous of which, probably, is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But all kinds of things were published at that time. Now, the normal story for somebody of my generation who started to read comics is they started to read superhero comics. And while I read a few, I really wasn't into that genre, and so I'm a little bit of an anomaly. But because of the time period I came into with this black and white boom, there was all kinds of things being published. I tended to prefer fantasy and sci-fi kind of stuff, and there was all kinds of these things on the stands at the time in my local comic book shop that I could go and purchase. Even the big two, right, DC and Marvel, they got into publishing fantasy and sci-fi. And so there was plenty to read at that time that was not superheroes. The other thing that started to happen was the beginning of manga being translated into English and brought into the US market. And that's what I want to talk about today. When I was in high school, one of the comics I absolutely loved was Gray by Yoshihisa Tagami. This was put out in 1988 by Viz, that's when it started. And it went all the way up through 9 issues. And here's the the first volume of the collected edition. Now at this time, Viz was a small company, and Gray was actually one of their first titles. And this is the comic I want to look at here today. So Gray takes place in the future, and at this time period most of the planet is a wasteland. And the remaining human beings live in towns, and the towns are designated by number. Within each town, there is what's known as a little mama. And the little mama is a computer that controls the town. But the little mamas, as the term little implies, are connected to the mainframe computer, which is called Big Mama, which makes sense, or sometimes referred to as Toy. Gray finally meets Toy in the final issue of the series. Now, some people in the towns want to achieve citizenship, and this means that they get to enter the city, and that's where Toy is. It's the main city. Now, in order to get citizenship, you have to score points, and when you get enough points, you can become a citizen. Now, how do you score points? Well, by being a soldier is the main way, and you have to fight other towns. Now, one of the questions becomes, if everything is governed by the same computer, why are the towns fighting each other? And that's one of the mysteries in Gray that Gray, and that is our main character's name, tries to solve. Now in the beginning, our main character Gray has no interest in becoming a citizen, no interest in becoming a soldier, but his girlfriend, Lips, signs up, and she ends up dying. So that's part of his reason for signing up, but also he feels guilty because when she left, he didn't say goodbye to her. So this is part of his motivation. And if you look at the helmet he wears, it's her helmet, and he wears that the whole time, and it's got the bullet hole in it that killed her. The other mystery that comes up in the story is that it turns out that towns that have a lower numbered name have better equipment. And they start to get better and better the lower the number the town is. If you compare this to Gray, his town is 303. All he starts out with is a tank, a jeep with a machine gun, and a motorcycle. And again, you can compare that to some of the other equipment that he encounters later, and it's completely different. So that's one of the other mysteries here, is why do these towns have such different equipment? Why are they so unequal? There's a lot more to the story, and I don't want to give too much away. But one of the things I loved about this comic was its storytelling, especially scenes like this, these kind of cinematic scenes. I'd never encountered anything like this before in comics, this slow pacing. And especially this scene where, this is just in the very beginning of the comic, there's this shootout between Gray and somebody else who's trying to get back. And this scene is very cinematic, but it's also interspersed with his memories, Gray's memories of saying goodbye to his girlfriend Lips. And then it culminates in this panel, this page, which is 3 panels. And again, this is this slow kind of storytelling. Scott McCloud talks about this in Understanding Comics, this kind of moment-to-moment storytelling that you often don't see in U.S. comics. And so when I first saw this when I was in high school, it made a huge impression on me because I felt it was incredibly powerful, and the scene was incredibly powerful because of the way it was staged. The other thing I loved about Gray was its mecha and its fight scenes. It's mostly fighting, mostly battle scenes, but with these really cool machines and robots that come around, and then really crazy weapons that happen later. And towards the end of the comic, and again, I guess this is giving something away, Gray gets this really cool jetpack that gives him all kinds of special abilities and allows him to survive and get to the end and actually meet Toy by the end of the comic. So that's Gray by Yoshihisa Tagami, one of the comics in the Mullins Library. Thanks for watching.